After years of struggling to make ends meet, a woman named Priya found herself in an unexpected situation that would change her life forever. Her uncle, who had always been something of a mystery to her, passed away suddenly. Though they weren't close, Priya was shocked when she discovered that he had left behind a large piece of land, and it belonged to her. The news came as both a blessing and a burden, because for the first time in her life, Priya felt like maybe things were finally going to turn around. The land wasn't just any ordinary plot either. It was located in a quiet suburban area known for its upscale neighborhoods and well-maintained streets. Priya had heard stories about this place growing up, but never imagined she'd have anything to do with it. She decided to visit the property, hoping to see what condition it was in before deciding what to do next. What she found there, however, completely blew her mind. When Priya arrived at the address listed on the inheritance papers, she expected to find open fields, or perhaps an old farmhouse, something rustic and untouched. Instead, she was greeted by rows upon rows of beautiful houses. Modern homes with manicured lawns stretched out before her eyes, looking like they belonged in a glossy magazine. Cars lined the driveways, kids played outside, and people walked their dogs along winding sidewalks. It was clear that someone had put a lot of effort into developing this land. But how? And why? Confused and curious, Priya drove up to the entrance of the neighborhood, where a sign proudly declared it part of Greenfield Estates. There was even a small office nearby labeled Homeowners Association, HOA. Hoping to get some answers, Priya parked her car and stepped inside. The receptionist greeted her warmly, asking if she needed help finding her way around. "I'm here because I inherited this land," Priya said cautiously, unsure of how to explain herself without sounding crazy. The receptionist looked puzzled, but quickly directed her to speak with the HOA president, a man named Rakesh Mehta. He was sitting at his desk, surrounded by stacks of papers and blueprints, exuding confidence and authority. When Priya introduced herself and explained her situation, Rakesh's face went pale. Rakesh tried to brush off her claims, insisting that all the necessary permits and paperwork had been filed years ago. But Priya wasn't convinced. Something about his reaction didn't sit right with her. Determined to uncover the truth, she requested copies of the documents proving ownership of the land. Reluctantly, Rakesh handed them over, though not without making snide comments about how this kind of thing happens sometimes. Back home, Priya pored over the documents late into the night. As she read through page after page, her suspicions grew stronger. The names on the deeds didn't match up, and several signatures appeared forged. Worse still, there were no records showing that the land had ever legally changed hands. It seemed impossible, but everything pointed to one conclusion. The entire development had been built illegally on land that rightfully belonged to her. Overwhelmed by anger and disbelief, Priya knew she couldn't ignore what she had uncovered. These weren't just empty plots of dirt. They were people's homes. Families lived here, raising children and building lives. Yet none of them realized that the foundation beneath their feet rested on lies and deceit. How could this happen? Who allowed it? And most importantly, what should Priya do now? She wrestled with the moral dilemma for days. On one hand, she had every legal right to reclaim her property. After all, it was stolen from her family under false pretenses. On the other hand, taking action meant potentially displacing dozens of innocent families who had no idea their homes were built on shaky ground. Could she really live with herself knowing she uprooted so many lives? As word began to spread among the residents that someone was questioning the legitimacy of their neighborhood, fear rippled through the community. Some accused Priya of being greedy, while others sympathized with her predicament. Tensions rose as neighbors argued over whether to support her or defend the status quo. Meanwhile, Rakesh and his team scrambled to cover their tracks, threatening anyone who dared to question their authority. Despite the backlash, Priya refused to back down. She hired a lawyer recommended by a friend and started gathering evidence to prove her case. Every day brought new challenges but also renewed determination. For the first time in her life, Priya felt like she had a purpose bigger than herself. Whether she liked it or not, She was now at the center of a storm that threatened to tear apart an entire neighborhood and possibly rebuild it in ways no one could predict. What started as a simple trip to check on inherited land had spiraled into something far more complex. Little did Priya know this was only the beginning of a long and difficult journey, one that would test her strength, challenge her values, and ultimately reshape the lives of everyone involved. Priya's decision to take on the Homeowners Association, HOA, was not an easy one. She knew she couldn't do it alone, so she reached out to a lawyer named Anil Kumar, who had a reputation for taking on tough cases against powerful entities. Anil was known in legal circles as someone who didn't back down, no matter how intimidating the opponent. After hearing Priya's story and reviewing the documents she had gathered, Anil agreed to represent her. He warned her that this fight wouldn't be quick or simple. It would require patience, resilience, and a lot of courage. The first step was filing a lawsuit against the HOA, demanding the return of the land and compensation for the years it had been used without permission. This legal action sent shockwaves through Greenfield Estates. Residents were suddenly forced to confront the unsettling possibility that their homes might not actually belong to them. Panic spread like wildfire. People began questioning everything they thought they knew about the neighborhood they called home. For weeks, whispers filled the streets of Greenfield Estates. Neighbors who once exchanged friendly greetings now avoided each other's eyes. Some blamed Priya for stirring up trouble, calling her greedy and selfish. Others felt sorry for her, realizing she was caught in a mess she hadn't created. A few even admitted privately that they'd always suspected something wasn't quite right about how the development came to be. Still, fear clouded everyone's judgment, and many clung to the hope that this whole issue would just go away. Meanwhile, Rakesh Mehta, the HOA president, was losing sleep over the situation. For years, he and his team had operated with impunity, convinced that no one would ever question their actions. They had forged documents, bribed local officials, and manipulated records to make it seem like the land was legally theirs. But now, with Priya's lawsuit threatening to expose their crimes, Rakesh grew desperate. He called emergency meetings with the HOA board, trying to come up with a strategy to protect themselves. At one particularly heated meeting, tempers flared as accusations flew across the table. One board member accused another of being careless with the paperwork, while another blamed Rakesh for putting them all in this position in the first place. Despite their infighting, they managed to agree on one thing. They needed to discredit Priya and paint her as the villain in this story. They drafted press releases claiming she was only after money and didn't care about the families living in the neighborhood. They also spread rumors among the residents saying Priya planned to bulldoze the entire development and sell the land to the highest bidder. As the tension escalated, Priya decided to attend one of the HOA meetings herself. She wanted to hear directly from the people affected by her actions and explain why she was doing what she was doing. The meeting room was packed when she walked in, and the atmosphere was tense. Some residents glared at her, while others looked curious but wary. When it was her turn to speak, Priya took a deep breath and addressed the crowd. "I know this is hard to hear," she began, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "But I didn't ask for any of this. I found out that my family's land was taken illegally, and I'm simply trying to set things right. I understand that many of you bought your homes in good faith, thinking everything was above board. That's why I'm working with my lawyer to find a solution that works for everyone, not just me." Her words sparked a mix of reactions. Some residents nodded in agreement, appreciating her honesty and willingness to listen. Others shouted back, accusing her of ruining their lives. One woman stood up, tears streaming down her face, and said, "I worked 2 jobs to afford this house. What am I supposed to do if you take it away?" Another man chimed in, yelling, "You're heartless, you don't care about us." The chaos continued until Rakesh stepped forward, seizing the opportunity to turn the crowd against Priya. With a calm but calculated tone, he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, let's not forget who caused this mess. This woman is using our hard-earned money and our homes to line her own pockets. We can't let her win." His words ignited a fresh wave-charged emotions, and Priya realized she was fighting not just a legal battle, but also a war of perception. Despite the hostility, Priya refused to give up. She spent countless hours talking to residents, answering their questions, and sharing evidence of the HOA's wrongdoing. She also started documenting everything, every interaction, every threat, every piece of misinformation spread by the HOA. This documentation would later prove crucial in court. Anil, meanwhile, dug deeper into the case, uncovering shocking details about the HOA's operations. He discovered that much of the money collected from homeowners under the guise of maintenance fees had disappeared into offshore accounts controlled by Rakesh and his associates. These funds were supposed to cover repairs and improvements in the neighborhood, but instead they had been siphoned off for personal gain. Even worse, some local government officials were implicated in approving fake permits for the construction projects, further complicating the web of corruption. With each new revelation, Priya's resolve strengthened. She shared the evidence with journalists, knowing that exposing the truth could help sway public opinion in her favor. Soon, stories about the scandal appeared in newspapers and on TV, drawing widespread attention. Reporters interviewed residents, lawyers, and even former HOA employees who had witnessed the fraudulent activities firsthand. The media coverage put immense pressure on local authorities to investigate the allegations seriously. As the scandal unfolded, cracks began to form within the HOA leadership. Board members turned on each other, scrambling to save themselves from criminal charges. One by one, they started cooperating with investigators, revealing incriminating details about Rakesh's schemes. Fearing arrest, Rakesh tried to flee the country but was intercepted at the airport. His arrest made headlines, further tarnishing the HOA's reputation. Through it all, Priya remained steadfast. She received death threats and harassment from angry residents who saw her as the source of their troubles. Her car tires were slashed and someone spray-painted offensive messages on her garage door. Yet she refused to back down, knowing that justice needed to prevail, not just for herself but for all the innocent people caught in the crossfire. One evening, as Priya sat at her kitchen table going over documents with Anil, she reflected on how far she had come. Just months ago, she was an ordinary woman struggling to make ends meet. Now she was at the center of a high-profile legal battle that had captivated the nation. It was exhausting, terrifying, and overwhelming, but it was also empowering. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was making a real difference. Anil leaned back in his chair and looked at her with admiration. "You've got guts," he said. "Most people would have walked away by now, but you keep pushing forward. Don't lose sight of why you started this fight." Priya nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She knew the road ahead would still be long and difficult, but she was ready to face whatever challenges came her way. Deep down, she believed that the truth would eventually prevail, and when it did, it would pave the way for a brighter future for everyone involved. Little did she know, the next phase of her journey would bring unexpected twists and turns, forcing her to rethink everything she thought she knew about fairness, compromise, and community. As the scandal surrounding Greenfield Estates continued to unfold, Priya found herself at a crossroads. The legal battle was far from over, but she couldn't ignore the growing unrest among the residents. Many of them were scared, angry, and confused. They had invested their life savings into homes that might now be taken away from them, and they didn't know who to trust. Some viewed Priya as the enemy, while others saw her as a victim caught in a web of corruption. But one thing was clear: something had to give. Priya spent hours talking to people in the neighborhood, trying to understand their fears and frustrations. She visited homes, attended informal gatherings, and even joined online forums where residents shared their thoughts. What she heard broke her heart. One elderly couple told her how they had sold their old house to move into Greenfield Estates, believing it would be their dream home for retirement. A young family explained how they had stretched every penny to buy a place where their kids could grow up safely. These stories reminded Priya that this wasn't just about land or money. It was about people's lives. At the same time, Anil was working tirelessly behind the scenes. He uncovered more evidence linking Rakesh Mehta and his associates to bribery, forgery, and embezzlement. It turned out that much of the money collected from homeowners under the guise of maintenance fees had been funneled into offshore accounts controlled by the HOA executives. This revelation shocked even those who had initially sided with the HOA. How could anyone justify stealing from hardworking families? The turning point came during a public meeting organized by local authorities to address the situation. Dozens of residents packed into the community center, eager to hear updates on the investigation. Priya attended too, standing quietly at the back of the room. As officials presented their findings, the mood shifted from anger to disbelief. Documents showed how permits for the development had been falsified, and audio recordings revealed conversations between Rakesh and corrupt government officials discussing bribes. When it was Priya's turn to speak, she stepped forward hesitantly. She knew not everyone in the room trusted her, but she wanted to share her perspective honestly. "I didn't ask for this fight," she began, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "I inherited this land, and when I discovered what happened, I felt like I had no choice but to act. Yes, legally this land belongs to me. But I also see the pain this has caused all of you. You've worked hard for your homes, and none of you deserve to lose everything because of someone else's greed." Her words struck a chord with many in the audience. For the first time, some residents started to view Priya not as an adversary, but as another person affected by the HOA's actions. A few people approached her afterward, thanking her for speaking openly and admitting they hadn't fully understood her side before. One woman hugged her, saying, "We're all victims here." Encouraged by these small signs of progress, Priya began thinking about possible solutions. She realized that simply reclaiming the land wouldn't fix the problem. It would only create more chaos and suffering. Instead, she proposed a bold idea, turning greenfield estates into a cooperative housing model. Under this plan, residents could collectively purchase the land from her at a fair price, ensuring they retained ownership of their homes while compensating her for the years of lost revenue. Anil helped refine the proposal, making sure it addressed both legal and practical concerns. The cooperative structure meant that residents would own shares in the land collectively, giving them a say in how it was managed moving forward. This approach also eliminated the need for an HOA, which had clearly failed to act in the best interest of the community. Initially, the idea faced resistance. Some residents worried about the financial burden of buying into the cooperative, while others doubted whether such a system could work. Doubts lingered and skepticism ran high. To address these concerns, Priya organized town hall meetings where experts explained the benefits of cooperative housing. They emphasized how it could provide long-term stability, reduce costs, and foster a stronger sense of community. Slowly but surely, support for the plan grew. Residents began to see it as a way to take control of their future, rather than remain trapped in a cycle of uncertainty. Even former critics warmed to the idea, acknowledging that it offered the best chance for stability and redemption. At one particularly emotional meeting, a man stood up and said, "We can't change the past, but we can build a better future together. Let's make this right, for ourselves, our kids, and everyone involved." Of course, implementing the plan required navigating bureaucratic hurdles and rebuilding trust between Priya, the homeowners, and local authorities. There were countless meetings, negotiations, and compromises along the way. Priya worked closely with Anil to ensure the transition was fair and transparent. She also collaborated with government officials to secure funding options for residents who needed help, covering the cost of joining the cooperative. Throughout this process, Priya remained deeply involved, attending every meeting and listening to feedback. Her presence reassured many residents that she genuinely cared about finding a solution that worked for everyone. Though there were moments of frustration and setbacks, the community pulled together, united by a shared goal of creating something positive out of a difficult situation. Meanwhile, the disgraced HOA members faced severe consequences for their actions. Rakesh Mehta and several others were formally charged with multiple counts of fraud, bribery, and embezzlement. Their trial became a media sensation, serving as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and greed. While justice was being served, the focus shifted toward healing and rebuilding. For Priya, the experience transformed her in ways she never expected. She went from feeling powerless and overwhelmed to becoming a leader and advocate for change. She learned firsthand the importance of empathy, perseverance, and collaboration. Most importantly, she realized that true strength lies not in winning battles, but in bringing people together to find common ground. As the final details of the cooperative agreement were hammered out, Priya felt a mix of relief and anticipation. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but she believed deeply in the resilience of the human spirit. Together, she and the residents of Greenfield Estates had taken the first steps toward a brighter future, one built on honesty, fairness, and unity. What started as a fight for justice had evolved into something much bigger, a testament to the power of forgiveness, compromise, and collective action. And though the scars of the past would always remain, they served as a reminder of how far everyone had come, and how much farther they could go if they continued to stand together. The transition to a cooperative housing model was no easy feat. It required patience, trust, and a lot of hard work from everyone involved. Priya, along with the residents of Greenfield Estates, faced countless hurdles as they worked together to turn what seemed like an impossible idea into reality. Every step forward came with its own set of challenges, but slowly, the pieces began to fall into place. One of the biggest obstacles was convincing all the residents to agree on the cooperative plan. Not everyone was immediately on board. Some people were skeptical about how the new system would work. Others were worried about the financial burden it might impose. A few even argued that Priya should just walk away and let them keep their homes without any further complications. But Priya refused to give up. She knew that finding a middle ground was the only way to ensure fairness for everyone. To address these concerns, she organized more meetings, sometimes multiple times a week, where experts explained how cooperative housing functioned. They talked about how owning shares in the land collectively would give residents a voice in decision-making, something they never had under the corrupt HOA. Financial advisors also presented options for those struggling to afford the buy-in, including low-interest loans and payment plans. Priya made sure every question was answered honestly and transparently. Despite her efforts, there were still moments of tension. At one meeting, a man stood up and accused Priya of trying to profit off their misfortune. His words sparked heated arguments, with some residents siding with him and others defending Priya. The room grew chaotic, voices rising over each other until it felt like nothing productive could come out of it. But then, an elderly woman named Mrs. Kapoor stepped forward. She spoke softly but firmly. "We've been through enough," she said, looking around the room. "This isn't about blame anymore. We're all victims here. Yes, even her." She gestured toward Priya. "What we need now is to focus on solutions. If this cooperative plan can give us stability and peace of mind, shouldn't we at least try? Or are we going to throw away our chance at a better future because we're too busy pointing fingers?" Her words silenced the crowd. Slowly, heads nodded in agreement. People realized that staying stuck in anger wouldn't solve anything. From that day on, attitudes began to shift. Residents started working together more openly, sharing ideas and suggestions to improve the cooperative structure. Priya noticed a change in the energy. It wasn't perfect harmony, but it was progress. Another challenge was dealing with the legal side of things. Anil, Priya's lawyer, played a crucial role in drafting agreements and ensuring everything complied with local laws. He worked closely with government officials to secure permits and approvals needed for the transition. This process took months, filled with endless paperwork and negotiations. There were days when it felt like they were running in circles, hitting dead ends or facing bureaucratic delays. But Anil reassured Priya that persistence was key. During this time, Priya found herself spending long hours at the community center, helping residents fill out forms and guiding them through the steps. She became a familiar face, someone people turned to when they had questions or needed support. Her presence helped build trust, showing everyone that she was committed to making this work, not just for herself, but for the entire community. As the cooperative model started taking shape, small victories began to emerge. For example, funds recovered from the HOA's illegal activities were redirected toward improving the neighborhood. Broken streetlights were fixed, playground equipment was upgraded, and landscaping projects gave the area a fresh, welcoming look. These changes boosted morale, reminding residents that positive outcomes were possible if they stuck together. But perhaps the most significant moment came during a special ceremony held to mark the official launch of the cooperative. On that day, residents gathered in the park at the heart of Greenfield Estates. Children ran around laughing, while adults mingled, chatting animatedly. A banner hung across the entrance read, "Welcome to our new beginning." Priya stood on a small stage, looking out at the crowd. She felt a mix of emotions: pride, gratitude, and a deep sense of responsibility. Taking a deep breath, she addressed the gathering. "When I first came here, I never imagined we'd be standing where we are today," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "This journey hasn't been easy, for any of us. We've faced fear, frustration, and doubt. But we've also shown incredible strength, resilience, and unity." She paused, letting her words sink in. Greenfield Estates isn't just a neighborhood anymore. It's a community built on honesty, fairness, and hope. And none of this would have been possible without all of you. Thank you for believing in this vision, for working together, and for proving that even in the darkest times we can find light. Her speech was met with applause, cheers, and even tears. Residents hugged each other, celebrating not just the success of the cooperative but the bonds they had formed along the way. For many, this day symbolized closure, a chance to leave behind the pain and uncertainty of the past and embrace a brighter future. In the weeks that followed, life in Greenfield Estates began to settle into a new rhythm. Residents took pride in their shared ownership, participating actively in meetings and volunteering for various initiatives. Kids played freely in the parks, knowing their families finally had a stable home. Neighbors who once avoided each other now shared meals and celebrated festivals together. The transformation was remarkable, proof that cooperation and goodwill could overcome even the toughest challenges. For Priya, the experience changed her in profound ways. She went from feeling powerless and alone to becoming a leader and advocate for justice. Through this journey, she discovered the power of empathy, the importance of listening, and the strength that comes from standing alongside others. Though it hadn't been easy, she knew she had made the right choice. As she walked through the streets of Greenfield Estates one evening, watching the sun set over the neatly lined houses, Priya felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The scars of the past would always remain, but they served as reminders of how far everyone had come. Together, they had turned a nightmare into a dream, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of unity. And yet, the story wasn't entirely over. While the cooperative model offered a fresh start, there were still lessons to learn and memories to honor. As Priya looked ahead, she couldn't help but wonder, what else could this community achieve if they continued to stand together? Months after the official launch of the cooperative housing model, Greenfield Estates had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. The neighborhood that once stood divided by fear and mistrust was now a thriving community, united by shared values and purpose. Residents who had initially viewed each other as adversaries were now friends, working together to build something stronger than any individual home, a true sense of belonging. Priya, though still deeply involved in guiding the transition, began to step back slightly from the day-to-day operations. Her role shifted from being the driving force behind change to becoming an advisor and mentor for the newly formed cooperative board. These board members, elected by the residents themselves, were ordinary people with extraordinary determination. They included a retired teacher, a young IT professional, a stay-at-home dad, and a local shop owner. Together, they represented the diversity and spirit of the community. One of the first major decisions made by the cooperative board was how to allocate the funds recovered from the HOA's illegal activities. After much discussion, the residents agreed to invest in projects that would benefit everyone equally. A new playground was built, complete with swings, slides, and shaded seating areas where parents could relax while their kids played. Street lights were upgraded, making the neighborhood safer at night. And perhaps most importantly, a community garden was established, giving residents a space to grow fresh produce and connect with nature. The community garden quickly became a hub of activity. Neighbors gathered there every weekend to tend to the plants, swap gardening tips, and share stories. It wasn't just about growing vegetables, it was about nurturing relationships. One elderly man, who had kept mostly to himself since moving into Greenfield Estates, found joy in teaching younger residents how to plant tomatoes and herbs. "I thought I didn't have much to offer anymore," he admitted during a casual chat. "But here I feel useful again." As life in the neighborhood settled into its new rhythm, Priya reflected on her journey. She had started this fight out of necessity, driven by anger and confusion over what had been done to her family's land. But somewhere along the way, her motivations had shifted. What began as a quest for justice evolved into something far greater, a mission to restore faith, not just in the system but in humanity itself. Through this experience, she had learned that even the darkest situations could lead to light if approached with compassion and perseverance. The disgraced HOA members, meanwhile, faced the consequences of their actions. Rakesh Mehta and his associates were convicted on multiple charges, including fraud, bribery, and embezzlement. Their trial exposed the full extent of their corruption, serving as a cautionary tale for others in positions of power. Some former HOA employees cooperated with investigators, providing valuable information in exchange for reduced sentences. While justice was served, many residents felt a mix of relief and sadness. They understood that punishing those responsible wouldn't erase the pain caused, but it did bring closure. For the families living in Greenfield Estates, the scars of the past remained, but they chose to focus on healing rather than resentment. Many residents organized events aimed at fostering unity and celebrating their hard-won victory. There were potluck dinners, cultural festivals, and movie nights under the stars. Kids ran around laughing, oblivious to the struggles their parents had endured. For them, Greenfield Estates was simply home, a place where they felt safe and loved. One evening, during a community meeting, someone suggested creating a memorial wall to honor the lessons learned from this ordeal. The idea quickly gained traction. Residents worked together to design a beautiful mural depicting scenes of cooperation, resilience, and hope. At the center of the mural was a tree with deep roots, symbolizing the strength of the community. Beneath it, engraved words read, "From struggle comes growth." When the mural was unveiled, the entire neighborhood turned out to celebrate. People brought flowers, candles, and small tokens to leave at the base of the wall. As they stood there, shoulder to shoulder, there was a palpable sense of pride and gratitude. This wasn't just a tribute to the past, it was a promise for the future. Priya watched the scene unfold with tears in her eyes. She realized that her decision to fight for justice hadn't only changed her life, it had touched countless others. Families who had once feared losing everything now had stability. Children who might have grown up surrounded by bitterness instead learned the value of forgiveness and teamwork. Even the cooperative structure itself stood as a testament to what could be achieved when people came together for a common goal. The months that followed, Priya continued to play a supportive role in the community, though she allowed herself more time to focus on her own life. She reconnected with old friends, pursued hobbies she had neglected, and even considered going back to school to study law. Inspired by Anil's dedication to fighting injustice, she dreamed of using her experiences to help others facing similar battles. Greenfield Estates also attracted attention beyond its borders. Local newspapers wrote articles praising the cooperative model, calling it a blueprint for resolving disputes fairly and sustainably. Government officials visited the neighborhood to learn how they could encourage similar initiatives elsewhere. Priya often spoke at these events, sharing her story and emphasizing the importance of transparency, accountability, and empathy. Despite all the progress, challenges still arose. Not every issue could be solved overnight, and disagreements occasionally flared up among residents. But instead of letting conflicts divide them, the community tackled problems head-on, using open dialogue and compromise to find solutions. The we cooperative structure gave everyone a voice, ensuring that decisions were made collectively rather than imposed by a select few. Looking back, Priya marveled at how far they had come. From a tangled web of lies and greed to a thriving community built on trust and collaboration, Greenfield Estates was proof that change was possible, even in the face of overwhelming odds. It reminded her of something her uncle used to say: "Every storm runs out of rain." Though he was gone, his wisdom lived on through the legacy of the land he left behind. As she walked through the streets one final time before selling her remaining shares of the property, Priya felt a profound sense of peace. She stopped near the mural, running her fingers over the engraved words. "From struggle comes growth." Yes, she thought, smiling softly. That summed it all up perfectly. With the proceeds from the sale, Priya decided to establish a scholarship fund for students interested in studying law or social justice. She hoped to inspire the next generation to stand up for what was right, no matter how daunting the challenge. In doing so, she ensured that her journey, and the lessons it taught, would continue to make an impact long after she moved on. Greenfield Estates wasn't just a neighborhood anymore. It was a symbol of resilience, unity, and hope. And as the icy sun set over the horizon, casting golden light across the rows of homes, Priya knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning of their story.